Before we start this episode, I wanted to tell you that if you're looking for free dog training courses, you can take the Victoria Stilwell Academy's most popular free course, Building Your Dog's Confidence, right now by going to vsdogtrainingacademy.com. That's vsdogtrainingacademy.com. Okay, now on with the podcast. Hi everybody, welcome to the podcast. I'm with the team today and we are talking about labels in dog training. How we're so quick to judge and so quick to put a label on behavior we see. Enjoy. Labels in dog training. What does that mean? Well, we've noticed it's not just, in fact, I would like to also cover like making judgments and labels, but I would first of all like to discuss about when somebody comes out with something new, is it new or is it what people are already doing, but they've just put a label on it or a protocol around it? Discuss. Ali.
I'd love to hop on first, if that's okay. And
yes, please do.
Kind of play or just go on both sides here, because I think sometimes we can have certain concepts that are wrapped up in a different package and pushed out into the world, and people expect it to be different or something like that, and other people just see right through it and say, oh, this is the same old thing. My dad actually says this quite a few times, having been in the human training world forever. He sees the same thing cycle every few decades. He says that it just gets repackaged. And I see that. And I'd also like to argue that there is a benefit to repackaging things or putting labels on things and calling them something new. One example would be the Zune. If you've ever heard of the Zune, this was the MP3 player that Microsoft came out with. And if you haven't heard of it, that's because nobody really bought it. But the iPod came out afterwards and that became really popular. So it was the same thing in a different package. There's a couple other things going on. I actually learned about it in my college entrepreneurship class in a case study, but packaging can be really important, and not just physical packaging, but the packaging of ideas. So sometimes dog trainers come up with different protocols and they call them different things. And I think sometimes it really does make a difference. And one thing for me that made a big difference was Chirag Patel's drop. So I know when Chirag came out with that, and I don't know the origin story of that. I'd actually love to know that, but where he came up with this. And I know a lot of us, sometimes we build on other people's ideas. But that video blew my mind. I hadn't thought about teaching a dog like that before. And I think it's inspired a lot of other ways to do different things. So teaching a dog something that simple by just kind of mixing up the steps, just, again, blew my mind. So I think there is value to a certain point in repackaging. And I do have to plug here for a second, Victoria. And I think that's the one thing we do really well at VSA and now to be at Positively. So that something you've always done well at It's Me or the Dog is make these things approachable, and you tell stories, and stories are compelling. And the way you package things and just kind of sometimes cut through some of the BS and make it really simple and make the science approachable, but also just conversational and bring the emotion into it, I think is important.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, that we at Positively, we've never said, and we've always come out and said, we didn't invent this, right? Positive training is not a scientific term, by the way. Positive training is the protocol that we use, the philosophy that we use in order to be able to put our message across. And it incorporates how we think you should live with dogs, how you should teach dogs, and how we can make dogs' lives better. But it's not a scientific term. The more scientific terms are things like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. But positive training is not a scientific term. So you won't see it in the science journals. You won't see that. But we have just taken, that's positive training, that's Positively. That's why we've called our company Positively, because we follow a certain methodology backed by science that puts forward what we believe and how we believe animals should be taught and treated.
Yeah, I love where you're both going with this. And one of the first questions that comes up for me when I see all brand new, completely changing, game-changing way of doing it is really the value of new. So when I think about the scale of dogs and how long dogs have been dogs, and I think about how fast we tend to turn over our own ideas, obviously there's a difference between those two timescales. And so we're hitting all new training, all new method, all new training, all new method at the same, at a pace that far outpaces any sorts of change that is happening in the species that we're working with. And so, I mean, just to be blunt, I don't want everything to be all new. I would like to learn from that's come before. I would like to keep what we have gained. And that also, as you were saying, Ali, but that's not to say that we have figured everything out, that we have the best possible training techniques that we will ever have, or that there is any need to have just one way to do something. There may be new ways that fit certain dogs and families better and stick better. And we don't need to go for just one. But when I look for new, I often think we confuse new with good. And new for me is an invitation to evaluate, okay, what's here that's good? It in itself, cutting edge, is not that valuable when it comes to training for me personally.
Well, we want to know that things truly work. And the longer they're out there, the more tried and tested they are, the more we know that they are going to work with different dogs and different environments and situations and ages. And I want to know something it works. But I do have an issue with things being packaged or repackaged, or things that are called that aren't called training. That training is one thing, and I don't know, playing games or teaching a dog through games is completely different to training, when actually still reinforcement. I mean, it's still following the sort of basic principles of learning. What do you think?
I really think that when it comes to that, it's almost like there's a little bit of marketing taking place in taking these known applications of learning science and either combining them in a particular way and giving that a name. It's kind of like it's like if somebody was, say, cooking soup, and they decided to put salt in first instead of last, and they said, well, this is now Lorena's cooking, soup cooking package, or Lorena's soup cooking methodology, or new method. And it just seems a little bit kind of out there in the sense that you really don't want to take that too seriously. I mean, you might want to talk about it and say, well, there's Lorena's soup cooking method, which is kind of crazy, but okay. So people know what you're talking about. But taking too much ownership of something that is just really a slightly different application of the science that's known, it can be more divisive than helpful in many cases.
So if you're taking something and you're basically saying, this is it, this is the holy grail, the rest of something, training is not, but like doing this is just, this is much better. I mean, yeah. But I have to say, for, kind of, we all do it at times. We all say, we're the flower. Yes, ours is the best. And, we people do that. That's just, I think there's also an eagerness to be able to give our dogs and our clients as many different kind of exciting, fun options as possible. And by doing that, we might get caught up in ownership of something that actually it's what a whole host of trainers do anyway. They just haven't put it in a package and packaged it up.
Yeah, I think that's the human nature of things. We're so swayed by all sorts of marketing in every aspect of our lives that I think it's become this natural thing that if you own a business or you're attempting to get ahead in your career or business, you are pressured. I think some people feel pressured to come up with the latest, greatest, newest, flashiest thing that's going to attract, because we as humans are still attracted to the new shiny things. And to Allie's point, I think in some cases that can be perfectly fine as long as you still have the integrity to help the person who you're selling to remember where this came from, or tie it to the science behind it, or tie it to where you learned it, and that you're maybe making it a little better or a little different or more exciting or more interesting, but this is where I learned it. I really think that both can live together, but it's up to the individual or the organization or the company to do that and to put those pieces together.
And one thing that I'm seeing in the chat is that people are talking about learning specifically. And so of course I have to pipe up here as the curriculum manager of VSA and Positively, is talking about different ways that people learn. And the cool part is we know this, we have a lot of evidence of how people learn best. And so that's one thing that we want to bring to the forefront personally. But then also this, thank you, Marion, for talking about how somebody talks about the scientific term and it sounds big and fancy. And like, why are you trying to use this jargon just to confuse everybody? And although jargon and terms, it matters sometimes, but there are things that, there's a difference between being a subject matter expert and being a good teacher or a good trainer. And I think that those two things, that's personally going to a research institute for school, not calling out any names, but it was very difficult to learn from subject matter experts. People who are the top of their field in research did not good teachers make. So
that's
very
really
frustrating to hear that. And one thing I wish we would do as dog trainers, and that we're going to start doing at Positively, is to keep data on our protocols. Why do we come up with these things and then we don't get any data? We don't even know if they work. We say they work. We see that they work anecdotally, but we don't test them very often. Occasionally, I know there's some great work, and I'm going to pick on the University of North Texas. They have done some great work on testing specific methods, and there is some evidence, but again, it's like one or a handful of studies that have looked at specific protocols. We can take some from humans, but we keep coming up with this stuff and yet we're not testing it. So we put it out into the world and we say it's the best, but is it truly the best? So I think that's one thing that we could do better as dog trainers, is to start to compile and do some citizen science.
That gets me excited. I want to do that. And I think actually these kind of come together because really labels can obscure when we're doing the same practice. So if we have two different labels for something that has a fundamental practice underneath it, we may not be able to see the commonality, and we may not see under what conditions this particular procedure or this principle is effective. And so when we pick labels, like, I love a label, I love a metaphor, I love a story. I think those kinds of conceptual organization, that can be really, really helpful. And it can make a bad teacher, but it can make a good one too, right? If you pick a really powerful set of concepts. At the same time, when we're choosing new names and when we're choosing new things, if we can tie them back, if we can be conceptually systematic, and we can start to see the underlying principles, and we can start to ask those big questions that you were asking, Allie. How can we be better at this? How can we be better for dogs? I hope in 20 years we have different answers than we have right now. But that, I think part of that does depend on being really careful with our language. Yes, pick new sticky labels that really inspire and stick together, but make sure that you draw those back to the fundamental principles that haven't changed, that underlie them. Yeah.
Can I complicate things a little bit here too? Because I love what everybody's saying. It's so interesting. First off, we're all animals that like novelty. So that makes sense that we get attracted to these different names. And protocols are wonderful. And I love all you folks who are researching and looking at, the data and all that. But also what I would look for is, does this method allow some adjustment for the individual? Because individuals have different needs. And if that's not built into the system at all, we can run into a lot of issues potentially. So putting that out there.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right, Wendy, because what might fit one dog doesn't fit another, and what might be a learning protocol that one dog thrives on, another dog is not going to do. So that's why I think it's really important that we again tailor our teaching to the unique needs of the dog that we're working with, and that we do have this sort of large library of knowledge that we can use, and protocols that we can use to help these dogs. But yeah, not all dogs like games. Not all dogs want to have fast-paced action games. Not all dogs want to sniff. Not all dogs want to do 10 repetitions of sit. So we really do have to look at our learner. How does our learner learn? And I always used to say that, when somebody says, their dog's not very smart, and I'm like, well, I don't think we should look at it like that. I want to find what your dog's unique learning style is. And let's see. And I think people are always like, wow, I never knew that my dog could do that. And I think it's wonderful when you say, actually, let's not think in terms of smart or intelligence or whatever. Let's think of how your dog learns. And not just how your dog learns, but the environment that you set up for learning. Taking your dog for a walk that just cannot listen to you outside might not be the best place to teach your dog how to listen to you outside, because it's just too much. Dog can't listen to you when it's outside. You can start to listen to you inside, and then you can build it up.
And I think, especially about intelligence, one of my favorite books is, DeWall's Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are? Oh, that was such a butchering of that title, but it is very long. It's something like that. But it's about, why do we measure dogs' intelligence by their ability to learn a language that they can't necessarily perceive? We take for granted the fact that they can understand our intonations and our voices, and yet they weren't evolved to do this as much as they are to smell or to do other things. So yes, play can be a really great way to help them learn. But again, if we're judging a dog's intelligence based on, can they sit when I say this, when I make this noise, it just frustrates me so much. So yes, Victoria, helping them come up with different ways to, their dog's probably cueing off of a bunch of different things. So I think getting back to what Maya said about, are we just repackaging things that have been tried and true forever and ever? Yes, are we packaging gamification is huge in the human training world right now too. And are we not just repackaging reinforcement-based training? Yes. Yes, we are. Yeah. If we're changing antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, that's what we're doing.
Which is great, right? If that package works, that I don't see why we need to have just one way to teach. And I really take Wendy's point, and I do think that protocols should be better than recipes. Protocols should be interactive, yes. Right?
Thank you. Recipes.
Really, yes, right. We don't want recipes in there. No. But when we have different methods, if we can tie them back to underlying principles of how behavior works and how it changes, then we are in a better place to meet the individual in front of us and say, for instance, your example, Victoria, say we want to increase engagement outside. I'd like my dog to be able to listen to me outside, but it's not working out there. Well, what dimensions can I adjust? What do I know about behavior generally so that I can adjust this so that we can start successfully for you, dog, not for the last dog I trained. And I think as trainers, we often fall into this trap. We'll say, I've seen this dog before. I saw a dog just like that who did this, and this is what worked for her. And I really try hard not to do that and really see the dog in front of me. Just because they present the same way doesn't mean that they are the same. They're not the same.
Those are the best at serving humble pie, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I would be done as a trainer if it were so cookie cutter, and if it were just the same thing over and over. That's one of my favorite parts of this work, is that every single dog, not only do I hopefully teach him or her something, but every single dog I've worked with over almost 20 years in this business has taught me something that I can take to potentially use for the next one. Maybe not that one, but one in the future. And if it weren't like that, I wouldn't enjoy it. I wouldn't want to do it. I mean, yeah. I love working with that individual and figuring out what makes that one tick and what that one needs from me to help him or her progress or be successful in their family, in their home.
And, I think that sort of not having that one size fits all approach is really important, because, for example, right now I'm going through the cases that I'm going to be having for the Dog Academy. And even though, on the television show, for those in the UK, when we meet the dog for the first time, that's truly when we meet the dog for the first time. We do have a little bit of an idea of behavior, and we sort of have an idea of protocols that we're going to use. And that can all change on a dime, by the way. As soon as that dog comes, we're like, oh, okay. And then you have to switch really quickly. But even with sort of going through this process now, it's like, it truly is, even with all the experience that I've had, of like, okay, this particular dog with these particular needs in this particular environment, how am I going to teach that dog most effectively? And it is stimulating researching, because again, I do love the science. I do use a lot of the science to back up what I'm doing. So I love that research. I love that problem solving. And I think that's what makes our business so enriching, is that we don't want to do the same thing all the time. And we don't want to just use play with our dogs or use treats with our dogs. We have to use what we think the dog is going to get the most out of, and the person's going to be able to do. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a beginner trainer, I went in and I spent 2 to 3 hours with clients, and I gave them the best spiel, everything that I'd learned. I was extremely impressive, and had no idea that those poor clients' eyes were like, they were done. They couldn't wait for me to leave. Because yes, I'd done some great things with their dogs, but they just couldn't take in any more information. And I learned really quickly, wait a second, pare it down, make it easy for people to understand, and don't talk so freaking much. And don't be sick, because Ali, as we know that people can't take in that amount of information at one time.
No, at some point it just starts to go in one ear and out the other. And in fact, that really is like 7 to 10 minutes is that amount of time for an adult. By the way, kids are a totally different ballgame. It's even shorter, much like it with puppies and dogs. And by the way, that's an evidence-based statistic, fairly have like from a meta-analysis, whereas the dog equivalent, we don't know. It's our best guess, but we don't necessarily have the evidence to back that up. I think it's really important when we talk about science, our science-led work, is to talk about almost the weight of the evidence in some cases versus others. What I was thinking when Maya was talking about how everything kind of goes back to an origin somewhere, is thinking most of what we're talking about here with games, with reinforcement, with punishment, all those are really in the same realm. And most of it can be found, I imagine, in Paul Chance's book, Learning and Behavior. Like we can find a lot of it there, which is a textbook about all these different studies from back in the day, Pavlov and all sorts of stuff. So if we're looking at learning in general, we knew a lot of what we know now, even in the 1950s, from when we could do studies on things that we can't really do studies on now because of like ethics and stuff. But now, a days when we're thinking about choosing these methods, it's important to do it in an evidence-based way, in the most effective way, but also we got to draw the line somewhere. And as positive trainers, we draw the line at using positive reinforcement as much as we can. And some people use different codes or ethics in their organizations. But when we're looking at it from a from the positively and VSA side, we talk about the pillars of positive training, and that really guides us to what we choose to use our methods. But in reality, all of this, it's the points. What is the saying? Everything's made up and the points don't matter. Well, here, everything's made up by humans. Fun fact, all these concepts.
Yep.
And the points really do matter, because at the end of the day, I don't like that phrase, but it works here. At the end of the day, your dog's emotional life matters. You matter as a human. We also forget that like you matter as well. So when we're picking these methods, I think it is really important to think about how it is packaged, because I don't know if we want to open this can of worms, but I think positive trainers have now started to get on the labels and concepts training, whereas the other side has been using it for a long time, of packaging things like this is just a stim collar, or this is just the vibrations, or this is just help me out here. We got a lot of other ways.
And we know those work very well, unfortunately, with the general public, and it's
Yeah. Well, actually, you know what, Ali, and I promise you that nobody actually knew this, but that I was actually going to ask about shock collars, because you're a beautiful segue, really. I really like that, and maybe we can come back to it. But I also in the UK, right, what is happening right now is that the government are due or have made a commitment to ban shock collars in February 2024. But for various reasons, including the e-collar industry, are shouting very loud there and turning some MPs' heads. And what we basically are calling for now is for trainers, whether you live in the UK or whether you live in the around the world, to write to the minister, the DEFRA minister, and Lord Benyon, and who is truly a supporter of the ban of shock collars, to thank him for his work, and also to thank him for his work in trying to ban shock collars, but also to encourage them to have a debate in September. If you see what happens in the UK, if legislation is going to be passed, they have to have a debate about it. And 6 months after their last debate, then as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, 6 months after the last, or they have to debate, and then 6 months later the law can be passed. So we need them to debate it. They can't ignore it, because they've already ignored it. They were supposed to debate it in June, and that was cancelled. And now they debate it. We need them to debate it in September so that the law can be passed in February. So for those of you, please write to Lord Benyon and say, hey, we thank you so much for supporting, but please encourage everybody to get this law passed. So what the industry is doing in the UK is they're shouting very loud, and they're saying, this is safety for people. It's safety for dogs. If you don't do this, if you don't pass it, then dogs will be killing sheep. They'll be killing cows. They will be getting shot by farmers. They will be aggressing. They will be this, they will be that. And so turning people's minds that don't really know about dogs or learning or training, but they put in a very effective argument. Put in the effective argument that these things work. Now, interestingly enough, I've just done a great podcast with Carolyn Menteith, who's a dog trainer and behaviorist in the UK. And that podcast will be going up on the Positively podcast, we hope, by the end of this week. But it's really interesting what she says. So first of all, the dogs that are worrying sheep and that are causing a problem out in the countryside in the UK is not, I think 90% of the dogs that are dogs that are getting out of their houses. Dogs that are actually walked are not the culprits, right? So this whole thing of you have to teach, and the only way you can teach a reliable recall is through a shock collar, is kind of null and void. By the way, just put your dog on a leash if you're walking them past sheep, but there you go. And the other thing is that, this training is quick, effective. It doesn't hurt the dog. So these are sort of some of the arguments they're coming out with. And I thought it would be really important that we discuss this here. Of course, we know what side we're on. but we also acknowledge that these things do work to a point, but they do work. And I think for people to say, because I think some people are arguing saying shock collars don't work, well, that they do. There's a reason why they're made like that, because they do work. They are made to cause discomfort and pain, and so they work to a point. But I thought we would discuss it with all of you and see what you thought.
Well, you can definitely say that they do work, and they do, but you're also opening up a whole set of unintended consequences when you're using it, because you're using pain and discomfort to do it. And it's every biological being's natural wish to survive, to try to mitigate that as much as possible. And yes, avoidance of a behavior so that they don't get hurt is one thing, but that feeling of pain is also going to create all sorts of fears. And you really can't predict what kind of an association these animals are going to have with the pain. That's it can be, they could associate the fact that, okay, yeah, it's because I'm going after the sheep, or they could just say, oh, well, there's the sheep, I'm about to feel pain from the gods. And now you're creating a whole different set of problems. So it does generate these unintended consequences that then, unfortunately, they're the kind of consequences that can create a lot of serious problems down the line.
Yeah,
I've been looking at a lot of research along these areas, and there are two that come to mind. One is that there's much higher rates of reactivity in dogs that have been trained this way. They become aggressive because they're freaking out, in a simple technical term, and they become scared, and so there's a higher rates of that. But they have to speak to Lorena's points about unintended circumstances. I was just reading a case study. I think it was out of a veterinary journal in Australia, where there was a Shiba Inu, I think, that had been trained this way, and through a board and train facility, came home. And then anytime the phone buzzed or rang, the dog flipped out entirely, because a lot of these e-collars do a warning buzz. And so it knew, and when it heard that, it was going to get punished, in a second or two. And so they had to go through such extraordinary efforts to not just change their ringtones, but change the whole living situation in the house and what the dog is exposed to try to, and then do positive reinforcement training to help it, work through some of that. I mean, the unintended consequences can be really multidimensional throughout the whole, dog's life.
interesting you say that. But yes, we absolutely see that. I mean, I've seen that myself in watching these dogs being trained with shock, but which, in order to educate myself, I have sort of exposed myself to a lot of these companies that are doing it like that. So it's just starting to really rain very hard here. But interestingly, in the UK, I don't know if it's on all the collars, but there is a big disclaimer on these collars, on the packaging, that says "Do not use with aggressive dogs," because or aggressive dogs or dogs that have aggressive response, because even the manufacturers understand that if a dog is aggressing, the potential of redirected aggression onto the owner. Of if you are adding something to the frustration and agitation and insecurity and fear of a dog that is in the act of aggressing, then it could be redirected upon a person. So there you go.
Are you a dog trainer looking to take your knowledge and skills to the highest level? Or maybe you're a dog guardian interested in figuring out whether your love of dogs can translate into more of a career than a hobby. Or are you already working in the pet industry but recognize that you need to fill some gaps when it comes to how to manage dog behavior so that you can better serve your existing clients? No matter where you are on your journey, the Victoria Stilwell Academy has courses that can help you get to where you want to go. From our free Building Your Dog's Confidence starter course to the powerful fundamentals of dog training and behavior course, all the way up to our flagship professional dog trainer course, we have options for every skill level and budget. All you have to do is be passionate about giving dogs the best lives possible. All of our courses are available online anywhere around the world 24/7. No gimmicky sales tactics where you need to act within a certain window to enroll. My amazing team at the Victoria Stilwell Academy understands that we need to be ready to serve you whenever the time is right for you to make the jump. Whether that means dipping your toes into our free courses or realizing your fullest professional dog training dream by enrolling in the dog trainer course. So, join the thousands of dog geeks like you that are a part of our amazing and supportive VSA family today. We have Academy specialists available to talk with you and figure out how we can help you reach your dog training goals, or you can enroll in a starter course for free right now. The Victoria Stilwell Academy. It's the future of dog training.
I mean, if there's not evidence against use.
Where's that disconnect between if they're already aggressive, don't use it because they'll be more aggressive, but if they're not, use it and they won't be? That just hurts my head. I don't understand how you can ethically sell an item that you have to put a disclaimer on. I guess people do it all the time, cigarettes and whatnot. You have to put a disclaimer on to tell them don't use it in this situation. But good luck in this one. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
I do think
how do you sleep at night?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to talk about the labels of this. It is very alluring. If you go on different trainers' websites, I've seen, having been the mentor coordinator for years for VSA and having to look at all these different trainers all over the world to find somebody and figure out who agrees with our training methods or not. It was pretty crazy to read some of these descriptions. To say you use positive reinforcement with a shock collar is really interesting. So I do want to stop with that for a second and just talk about these labels that, again, are human constructs. But here we go, just to remind everybody that we actually are applying labels right now. I see in the chat, we're asking if this tool is good or bad. We're asking, we're talking about methods as good or bad, successful or not. And we think about, what do these words mean? So just to remind everyone that, and again, I put the books that we referenced because in the Q&A, talking about Paul Chance's Learning and Behavior, that while labels don't matter, they also do matter. So let's look at a couple labels of just reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement means maintaining or increasing the likelihood that the behavior will occur again. So positive reinforcement, adding something to maintain or increase the likelihood this behavior will happen again, is not an opinion. It's not a marketing term. It's not something that, oh, positive training works, as in, positive reinforcement is being nice to your dog. It's not. You can be smiling at your dog and your dog finds this aversive and decreases whatever behavior you don't want. So punishment, that would be punishment, which is the decrease in likelihood that the behavior will occur again. Again, these are labels, I guess, that are very heavily based in the evidence. So we can kind of say, kind of like, maybe not as much as gravity, but we can say that these things are true. They are scientifically valid. And therefore, I want to be sure that we're all talking about the same things when we're on the chat. Good and bad are not terms that we can really back up with the evidence. So we just want to be sure we're all talking about the same things, which I think can be really helpful. So if we're looking at these labels, they can help us in some situations, but then when they're turned into a way that's not used that way. So for example, you say that you can use positive reinforcement with a shock collar. I don't know how that's possible. So that's where Victoria and we draw the line, is when you have tools that really can't be used as reinforcement. Therefore, I guess we could use it as negative reinforcement if we really want to get down to it. But if we can't use them as a reward, that's when we wouldn't want to use them. So someone mentioned banning training methods versus training tools. I think we can agree that there are some tools that the evidence is so overwhelming that they shouldn't be used at all, versus a head collar perhaps. the head collar itself is not aversive, but the way it could be applied, much like a piece of paper is not aversive until you get a paper cut.
True. Oh my gosh, I just got one today.
Very aversive.
Darn this paper, darn it. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think I think there's a lot of people that actually get the positive reinforcement thing wrong when it comes to shock collars. I've seen e-collars being used for companion dogs where it's stim, 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 but I'm going to say shock, 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 shock. And you're going sit, 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 sit. And then when the dog sits, then that is taken off. That is not positive reinforcement, right? What is that?
Be negative reinforcement.
Negative reinforcement. And I've had discussions with trainers who are doing this, and they're like, "This is positive reinforcement." I was like, "No, it's not. It's negative reinforcement." So that I think is maybe, Ali, the way that some of those trainers that use those methods have basically been saying that that's a positive thing, but it's actually not. You're actually using negative reinforcement. So, and that's just the science of learning. I mean, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. And it really, for me, when we say that shock collars work, one thing that I always want to add to that is they are using those same principles that we use when we use play, food, rewards, in the sense that they are all working on systems of reinforcement, punishment, motivation, and other parts of learning. And so sometimes I think we give the impression that shock collars work faster or better, or that they cut work out, but they cannot, because learning is learning. And so I really, really don't want positive trainers to give the impression that here we're hoeing the hard road over here. No, you have the same principles available to you, and you don't need to use pain to be fast or effective. And I worry sometimes when we get in these tools discussion that we give this idea that somehow positive reinforcement or more dog-friendly methods are slower. They don't need to be slower. They shouldn't be any slower.
No, I mean, my gosh.
Yeah. Right?
Sorry,
Yeah.
I have to say, it's me or the dog. I have a day now to teach these dogs.
Yes.
The dog academy, I have a day, one day, and I'm dealing with some really tricky behavior. So, and I know, I'm sorry, just to toot my own horn, because trainers are doing that every single day. Like, they might not be doing on TV, but they're certainly doing every single day in private practice. So I absolutely agree, Maya.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are times where it takes more time, but guess what? It takes more time to do operant conditioning and classical conditioning, whether you're using pain or not. Sometimes it takes time to learn. So, so I just think we want to make sure we don't set up a straw man where we have a super effective, but perhaps unethical tool. It's the same principles. And again, back to those labels, if you understand how learning works, you're less likely, I think, to be taken in by those kinds of claims.
So Maya, though, like, we just had something in the chat around that prongs don't poke. They don't, they don't hurt. We're doing it from our point of view. We're saying this shock collars don't cause pain.
Mm-hmm.
We can try it on ourselves and we can go, ow, ow, that hurts. But for dogs, somehow they don't cause pain. We can say that. We can say it very enthusiastically. We can say it in our marketing materials. We can say that other people that don't agree with shock are saying this, but shock collars don't cause pain. We can say prong collars don't hurt dogs. We can say choke collars don't hurt dogs. But why do they? Because they don't always work. But why are we saying this?
Yeah.
Why?
I mean,
we're not the ones experiencing it.
Right. And I do think that this is where, it's kind of the Wild West when we're out there training dogs right now in terms of regulation. And that means that everyone who is entrusted with a dog, who cares for a dog, whether they do so professionally or personally or both, that we all need enough education to see through claims like that. And to me, that education is a basic education about how learning works. And as professionals, I want us to come up with the most sticky, best things to get positive reinforcement in the most minds and the most hands. And I also want to make sure that we are conceptually systematic enough that we teach also how this is working, and we tie it back so that same guardian can go and evaluate a claim and go, oh, prong collars, they don't hurt. Well, why do I see behavior change then? how could the removal of the pressure cause a behavior change? And the little BS meter is going to go off at that point if you have enough of a basic understanding. So that's really my pitch for why let's come up with whatever package feels great, and let's tie it back so that we realize where it's coming from, and so that we can then evaluate and judge, as you were saying, Allie, what is it that fits with my values for my life with my dog. And
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone in this room for whom the value is train with pain, right? So those are just off the table, no matter what claims are made about how they work.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, Maya, even though I totally agree with what you said, Victoria, as far as we want to keep things simple and something doable for our clients so as to not overwhelm them, I also sometimes feel like positive trainers don't give our clients enough credit to be able to understand, like not go deep down the rabbit hole of all sorts of operant conditioning and learning theory, but the basics, like you said, so that they have the knowledge once you leave their house or they leave your Zoom room or however you meet with them, that they will have a BS meter that they even know how to use. Because if you haven't shared with them how learning works and what to look for, I mean, we are the professionals that they're reaching out to for this knowledge, for this information. Yes, they want to fix the problem that they called us about, but in order to do that, you do need to help them understand how and why, so that they have that knowledge. I think we owe it to them, and that's how it's going to spread.
Without a doubt, you want to leave them empowered, absolutely, because it's not teaching a little shtick, and I'm gonna, it's the magic trick, and I'm not going to show you how it's done. This is about giving them the tools so that as life happens, they have a better idea on how to address things and really not have the wool pulled over their eyes. That's just so absolutely necessary. And Maya, going back to, why is it that people are making all these claims that, that the prompts don't hurt, that, stim, it's just a little stim. It doesn't really hurt them. And it's marketing. You can't really market, I'll shock your dog into compliance. That's not something that's going to sell your services or your product. So yeah, I mean, people that have something to sell will have a tendency to word it in such a way that it makes it appealing. But it is important to absolutely put the knowledge out there so that dog guardians everywhere can truly, be able to sniff out the smelly stuff.
You made such a great point, Lorena. The whole fact that they have to label it, that label masks the reality. It's implied that they don't really want to hurt their dog either. They know you don't want to hurt your dog. So they put some smoke and mirrors over it to tell you won't be hurting your dog. So, and yet you very well are, but because the labels, here's again back to the labels, it's a misleading label. But it speaks to the fact that really most people would rather not, or they have to rationalize using these tools.
And circling back just a hair, what I was going to say on the, we said that shot collars work because of the intensity. And if we choose the right reinforcement, we can get the same results. I mean, think of the one area that's comparable. A dog countersurfs one time, grabs the loaf of bread. That behavior is going to continue, and it's going to take a little bit of time to reduce that behavior. So that's where management comes in. So I think, positive reinforcement, if we just take what the dog does naturally, we see that it works, and it works just as well, and stop, and getting a behavior. So we just have to figure out how to match that reinforcement value as trainers. And that's what makes us great trainers over time. And so that's the point we have to get across. We've got the same tools in our toolbox.
You bet.
That's such a great example, Tara, of exactly what I was thinking about, that it's conditioning, right? And so we can choose to be effective and humane and kind, and should, for all of the reasons that we just described, both because I think we owe it to animals, and also because the fallout of using aversives is messy. And it's not what most people want. I think you're right, Wendy, that almost no one gets a dog because they want to hurt them. That's not why we choose to share our lives with them. And that's true for almost all of my clients as well, maybe all of them. And so when we show and have and develop powerful, sticky ways to use reinforcement, to use kind methods, to adjust those so that they're working for every dog, that's when I think we will really be successful. At the same time, I don't want to go into anyone's home and have them do it because I said so. To Lorena's point, I want them to do it because they understand it and they see that this is what's good for them and their dog. And that does require some explanation. Because if they'll follow me blindly, they'll follow anyone blindly. And we don't live in a world in which that's going to be good for them or for their dogs.
Absolutely. That's one thing that I do tell all my clients is they have to realize that they are their dog's advocate and that they are within their rights at any point in time, whether it's with me, whether it's with any other trainer, that if we're indicating them to do something and it doesn't feel right to them, they're not comfortable doing it, they need to speak up and they need to ask us why we're asking, why we're doing something. And if they're not comfortable with it, we, the professionals, should have enough knowledge to say, okay, let's apply it in this other different way, the package in this another different way that makes them more comfortable. But again, yes, it really, no dog owner ever under the care of any professional should feel intimidated by that professional to do something to their dog that they are not okay with. Don't be quiet, speak up.
Yeah. I want to say, because a couple of people are on the chat about, the television and it, looks like all amazing, a 45-minute television show or 45-minute episode. Oh, and the dog is cured. And I've done really training on TV since 2005, which is when It's Me or the Dog started. And after 150 episodes of that, plus the whole host of other TV shows I've done, I feel like the formula for It's Me or the Dog works in that there's a whole ton of preparation that happens before. The time when I'm actually working with the dog is incredibly well crafted. Nothing is edited to make it look like it worked when it didn't. That's really important. We are absolutely like 100% on, we don't want to make claims. And I also learned very quickly that it was really important to say, this is the launch pad, this is the start, because some things, yes, I can truly, and I think it surprised me, not even skill, but it surprised me how incredible dogs are and how quickly they can learn. And if you get that right, just blend of great environment and reinforcement, and you can see behavior change very quickly in some respects. So it always surprises me. And I know Jo Pei from the Dog Academy, it was like the first series of the Dog Academy, it was her first training on television. And she was like, what surprised me is how amazingly adaptable and how quick those dogs learned. And I'm like, yes. And that's just a testament, I think, to the use of positive reinforcement. Now, I can't speak for how other television shows are edited, or I can't speak for those. But what I will say is that I think it's important that when you see methods that are punitive, that you do take them with a pinch of salt, because anything, being the television business, anything could be made to look amazing when actually it's not. And then when you watch with the sound off and you just watch the dog's reaction, you might get a little bit more insight into what's actually happening. So don't be seduced by the quick fixes you see on television. Learn from some of the techniques. How do I do this technique? Do more research on them. See if they are going to work with your own dog, and then go from there. Do not be lulled into this magic wand. Though I have to say, we do use the magic wand icon when it comes to management, because I truly think management is magic. And Tara mentioned the fact of management and how important and vital it is to not just stop dogs from doing the behavior we don't want dogs to do, but to create a safe environment so that dogs feel safe. They feel supported, pressure's taken off. People feel safe and supported and pressure's taken off them. It's almost like management is that wonderful support where it can give everybody time to breathe and think. So don't be worried about using management, or is it a cop out if you use management. We say management is extremely important at Positively. And that's kind of like that is our magic wand. And then that gives us time to breathe and gives the dog time to breathe. So then we can work on a longer training protocol. So I hope that's answered the questions or the discussion that was going on in the chat there regarding the television and how kind of seductive it can be in showing such success.
Yeah,
Victoria, one thing I will add, sorry, Ali, you mentioned all of the prep work, but I wanted to mention also that you do an awful lot of follow-up with those clients, checking in, following up, providing additional support, resources, information, techniques. So it's not, yes, it's edited for the amount of time you have on television, but there's so much more that people don't see.
Yeah, and people always know, like I'm corresponding with somebody from It's Me or the Dog that I filmed, that I think those episodes are coming out next year. But to this lovely, lovely lady who we're emailing back and forth all the time, and I do make myself available for those people who are like, if you want ongoing support, I'm here, right? This isn't just a television show. I'm here. You're my client. You're my client for life. And some people don't contact me again, and other people do. They contact me a lot. But I think that's really important. And I know we're sort of nearly up to the hour. This always goes so fast. But circling back to what we started with about repackaging techniques and sort of putting a label on them, and sometimes, that basically saying our way is the best way. I think the positive philosophy, and I know it is what we need to be doing. We want to have emotionally confident and supported dogs. They're safer to live with. They're safer for humans to live with, and they're happier. And humans are safer because of it and happier because of it. That's a no-brainer. But we also, I think people need to be careful about taking what trainers have done for years and years and years, putting into a neat little package, and then devaluing those trainers that have been using this for years and years and years. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. We stand on the shoulders of giants, right? We have mentors. All of us have mentors who kindly and carefully showed us how to do our early work with dogs. Hopefully we will all build on that and be mentors for others, but that is just moving the needle a little bit. And it would be a shame if we lost that knowledge, that experience, and if we weren't able to take that with us, even as we strive to do more, to find new ways to deliver information, to find new ways to teach. And I do think we could do more of that, even though I understand the marketing pressures are to show up as if you sprung fully formed as a master dog trainer out of nowhere. That of course is not the way that any field, especially something as complex as teaching, training, and behavior, that's not the way that really excellent trainers are born.
Yeah. And there's a question here, just wondering about which Victoria you slightly answered. Is it possible to have complete results after one session with dogs? It depends on what you're teaching them. It depends, but yes, it is. It is possible to have really great results after one session. It's what we train to do. But with always the caveat that learning is learning, and everybody learns at a different pace. So while we might have a complete, like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing session. Wow, we did so good. And the dog is doing amazingly. The next day you do ask the same, and that's it. It's totally different. Right? Because it does take repetition sometimes, and we all need a bit of a jog of our memory now and again. And it's no different with dogs. I also do want to say that I don't want to diss the trainers that are coming up with new things, like Chirag Patel. I mean, that's there are so many trainers, Sarah Fisher with ACE, that are doing protocols now, taking things that they've learned and doing things that are maybe making people see things in a different way. And so, there are many, many people out there doing it. And I just have to say as well, that my own experience of, coming up with something new is the canine noise phobia series, where I had always used, let's say, a dog that is worried about thunderstorm noise. So I always used, desensitizing to the noise of thunderstorms with playing thunderstorm noise and at a low level and doing fun stuff with the dog, and then gradually increasing the level and doing fun stuff and gradually increasing the level. And I like that until I met Joshua Leeds from Through a Dog's Ear. If you want to have music to calm your canine, Through a Dog's Ear, Joshua Leeds, who is a psychoacoustician. Psychoacoustician is the person who studies the effect of sound on humans. A bioacoustician is somebody who studies the effect of sound on dogs. And he is also a bioacoustician. And so he spent many years as a sound researcher, especially working with children with autism. But for also, over 10 years has now been working on helping dogs and using sound and music to help dogs calm, to create calmer environments, to bring down heart rate, and his work is groundbreaking. And he and I got together because I was like, how can we perfect this noise phobia stuff? And we found that actually we got an amazing result by pairing his music with the sound. And that's where you have things and protocols like the Canine Noise Phobia series that I'm very proud of, that took a lot of, it took us years. And then before that, Joshua had many clinical trials, and it took us years to perfect before we brought out the series. So something like that I am proud of. Now, does this protocol, which I'm very proud of, which I has worked with so many dogs, does it work with every dog? No. And so that's why I think you've got to know your learner. And so I'm not going to say, hey, this is the be all and end all the rest of y'all that do this other desensitization stuff to noise, that's a bunch of crap. This is the best, right? I'm not going to say that, because there's still many people that do great work with noise phobias. So I just want to, before we end, I just kind of want to make that clear. We're not dissing those people, but we are saying, hey, if you latch onto a particular protocol and you're gung-ho about it, great. But do be aware that maybe, this is just marketing, or this is just something that somebody has taken and repackaged. I've just talked a lot. Ali, what do you think?
I was just going to say that there's a lot of talk about management in the chat, and yes, we're talking about labels, and management is another word that we've made up. Trainers, positive trainers in general. There's a lot of trainers, and there's a whole school of management at the college where I went to, and that had nothing to do with dogs. So maybe it's something we could talk about next time, because really what we've been talking about today is all the things that come after the behavior, the consequences, and a lot of reactive things, in the sense that we as humans are reacting to the dog's behavior. But another thing we kind of talking about in our meetings is what's going to be kind of the new school way of doing things, that maybe that's even old school now, and there's a new way of thinking. So I think perhaps maybe we could talk about that next time.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for your amazing insight. Really, really fascinating. I get very excited when I do these things, even every Tuesday, to learn and to discuss and to flesh this all out, because I think we all need it. I think it's inspiring. So thank you for inspiring me. Thank you, everybody who has contributed to the chat and who have listened to this today. yes, we endeavor to be back next month. Now, I will be filming next month at the Dog Academy, so I'm hoping that I can be here. But if not, I'm going to leave everybody in there. Well, I'm going to leave you in their capable hands, and hopefully I'll be back the next month after that. But I just want to thank Wendy and Lorena and Tara and Maya and Tiffany and Ali for their expertise and their passion and love of dogs and love of teaching. Really, that's at VSA, we really do pride ourselves on having the very best faculty ever. And I think I can say that. And then obviously VSPDTs, VSPDT trainers, we really, really value you very much. So thank you so much for your dedication for making the lives of animals and people better. And that's it, everybody. I hope that you are okay. And thank you so much for listening. And we will be back next month. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Victoria Stilwell's Positively podcast. For Victoria's online dog training courses, more information, and helpful dog training tips, visit Victoria's official website at positively.com. Get connected on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media as Victoria Stilwell, and follow her on Twitter at Victoria S. Learn to become a professional dog trainer with the Victoria Stilwell Academy at vsdogtrainingacademy.com. And be sure to tune in next time as Victoria helps you and your dog live your best life together, positively.